MLB's Rule 5 draft has brought a lot of talent, such as two-time Cy Young Award winner Johan Santana, Home Run Derby champion and former MLB All-Star Josh Hamilton, first baseman Ryan Noda, who the A's took in the Rule 5 draft last year and was their everyday first baseman, and other solid players like the flying Hawaiian Shane Victorino. The 2023 Rule 5 draft just happened today, and in this video I'm going to break down every single pick that each team has made and give you a snapshot of who some of the breakout players who might make an impact this year in Major League could be. As always, hit that baseball in the bottom right corner to subscribe. There's also a link down in the description to do so as well. And without further ado, let's go ahead and break down the 2023 Rule 5 draft picks. With the first pick, the Oakland Athletics took Mitch Spence, a right-handed pitcher from the New York Yankees. Spence was a 10th round pick in the 2019 MLB draft, and the A's are really hoping he can stick in their rotation. They said they're willing to move him to the bullpen if things don't work out, but that's where they're going to try and start him this spring training. His fastball is more like a cutter. It hits around 91 miles an hour, so it's not a super fast pitch, and he has a really strong sinker that he likes to bury into the dirt. He has a curve and a changeup too, but those really don't hit the zone a lot, so that might end up moving him towards a reliever role, but there's still a lot of potential for him to be a starter with a good 4-pitch mix that has a little bit of sweep and everything. He's starting to develop a sweeper a little bit. It's around 83 miles an hour, and he gets a lot of swing and miss with that, and that's what the A's were really going for. That sweeper is something that a lot of players are now starting to develop, and the A's thought they had a lot of potential to go ahead and develop it into a front-of-the-line starter. We'll be using Fangraphs roster resource to see where these players fit in. Thankfully, they already have all the Rule 5 draft picks in their little projections, and Mitch Spence is a long reliever, as you'll see all the pitchers in this video are, simply because a lot of times that's just what fits best. Pitchers often end up being kind of shoved to the back of the bullpen so they can protect them, see what they have, go in low-leverage roles. Spence will have a shot to reach that starting rotation. Osvaldo Bido is not a breakout name. He could very easily be beat for that 5th rotation spot. When Ken Waldichuk comes back, there'll be some contention there, but he was in the bullpen a little bit. They do have some depth in their minor leagues of guys who have gotten in some of their more recent trades that could potentially push for a spot, but I don't see Mitch Spence having any issues sticking in the Major League roster. Someone like Francisco Perez might not make the roster. Sean Newcomb hasn't looked great. So there's a lot of players that can end up being, taken out in exchange for Mitch Spence, as Spence has a lot of potential to be a good player and be a solid piece for them in the future. So I see him sticking the entire year there simply because the A's just don't have a ton of big bodies to really give them innings, and Spence will provide them that at what ideally for them will be a quality rate. So talking through everything, I'm going to give this selection for the Oakland A's a B. I think it's a solid pick, but it's not anything to write home about, and there's a chance he'll stick on the Major League roster, which is sometimes all you can really ask for. With the second pick in the Rule 5 draft, the Kansas City Royals also went to the Yankees farm system and selected right-handed pitcher Matt Sauer, who's ranked 25th overall on MLB Pipeline's top 30 prospect for the New York Yankees. Sauer was the second-round pick of the Yankees in 2017, signing for just below $2.5 million. He blew out his elbow to start 2019. That has kind of hindered his progress a little bit, but he seems to be about ready to go ahead and make the jump to the major leagues. He has a solid fastball and an above-average slider, but his curveball and changeup are a little bit below average. So although he does have a 4-pitch mix, there's not really a standout pitch, and the fact that his low 80 slider is his best pitch is not necessarily something to write home about. Although it's probably a little bit better than average, it's not something that is jumping out, and he definitely seems to be destined to be maybe a back-end starter or potentially someone who is a mid to low-leverage reliever. His curveball has shown a little bit of life recently, a little bit more bringing the hammer down, if you'd say. So if he can go and develop that a little bit more, make that a solid plus pitch, I think there's a potential for him to be a very good player. But he needs to develop himself a little bit more. He has good control, which builds well for him. But with those 4 pitchers not really being elite or having any real semblance of, a strong pitch to rely on, he needs a little bit more in his stuff and just control to really cement himself as a good player going forward. The Royals are in a pretty similar situation to what the A's are in. In fact, they don't have a ton of big talent on their Major League roster, so Sauer should have the ability to go ahead and stick long-term in their bullpen or in their starting rotation. They have a ton of lefties in their starting rotation already: Cole Ragan, Daniel Lynch, Anio Zarpa, and you have Chris Bubik, who just underwent Tommy John surgery at the beginning of 2023, also as a lefty who will probably come back around mid-season. The fact that Sauer is a righty and could potentially stop into one of those starting roles is important. I don't think he will. I think he'll end up in the bullpen. But he's someone I think will make it all the way until the end of the Major League season, and therefore he'll stay with the Kansas City Royals. Not every Rule 5 prospect ends up going that route, so I think it's a good thing that he'll end up staying there. I think I'll give this the same grade I gave the Oakland A's, a B. It's not anything to write home about, but he's a good enough player that I'm not going to sit here and say this was a bad pick. He just wasn't in my personal top 5 players to get selected, so it's a good pick, but not something that I really love for the Kansas City Royals. The third selection was Anthony Molina, a right-handed pitcher who went from the Tampa Bay Rays to the Colorado Rockies. It's never great to go from Tampa Bay, which is a very analytically minded organization to the Rockies where you're not pitching in Coors Field. So his value is probably going to be a little bit lower simply because of that. But there's still some interesting things that can get players excited about his future. He's got a 4-pitch mix, a slider, a curveball, which he doesn't use a ton but uses enough, a changeup, and a 4-seam fastball. They don't have a ton of break, and there's not a big split difference between lefties and righties that he goes against. But he does not walk a ton of guys, which is good. He has a little bit more command than you see from your average reliever, and that's, I think, where he ends up. As a low leverage guy, he's not going to be someone who's going to be a good starter, in my opinion. He has the pitch mix to do it, but there's just not a ton there. I don't think he's going to end up making a huge difference, but that's just kind of how it is. When his changeup makes contact with the bat, there's not a lot of hard contact, which is good, but that's really the only big thing I can see that is a plus potential and why I think he probably slots in as a low leverage guy in the long term for the Colorado Rockies. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Rockies' pitching depth right now. They have an okay starting rotation. Kyle Freeland is definitely a solid starting pitcher. Someone I wouldn't call an ace, but is pretty close up there, especially for pitching Coors Field. Kyle Quantrill was a former top prospect who just got DFA'd by the Guardians a couple months ago. So there's not a ton to love. Peter Lambert, former top prospect still. Austin Gomber, part of the Nolan Arenado trade. Just nothing to excite me. Same with their bullpen. I don't really see a name that jumps out and says this is a guy that I think is going to be a dominant player. Justin Lawrence was pretty decent in 2023, but none of those other names really jump out at me, and pitching Coors Field is not something that's easy to do. So there's a lot of potential for Anthony Molina to make this roster. I don't think that's a byproduct of him being a great player, but more of a byproduct of just being in Coors Field when the Rockies don't have a lot of quality pitching. I'll give this acquisition a C. I was thinking about a C+ simply because there is a little bit there, and he was a third pick, so the Rockies must have seen something, but I just don't get it. He has a couple good pitches. He's probably going to be someone you can stash and see if he can develop something, but if the Tampa Bay Rays didn't develop him, I really don't know what the Rockies are thinking. We've seen that before with Evan Phillips going from the Rays to the Dodgers, where the Dodgers really unlocked something out of him, but the Dodgers are another analytical organization. So I really don't see this happening. I think a C is a good grade for it, and we'll see how it goes, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him make him the entire year on the Rockies roster. The first lefty taken was by the White Sox, 4th overall, and that's left-handed pitcher Shane Drohan, who was out of the Boston Red Sox organization. MLB Pipeline had Drohan as the 19th ranked prospect in the Boston Red Sox system, and that's mostly due to his changeup. It's a plus pitch, probably about a 60 grade overall, and it's really the only pitch that really stands out when you look at Drohan's skill set. Taken in the 5th round of the pandemic-shortened 2020 MLB draft out of Florida State, he fell a little bit simply because he just didn't pitch a lot. In 3 seasons at Florida State, he didn't even work 75 innings because of control issues and the pandemic, so there's still a lot of unknown about what his profile would be and exactly how he'd translate to the minor leagues. He really put things together in 2022, leading the Red Sox system in strikeouts and worked his way up all the way to AA. His softball reaches about 95 miles an hour. It's okay. It's not a great pitch. There's not a lot of movement on it, but it works well enough because it does have a little bit more velocity than some of the other pitchers. It's about MLB average right now at 95 miles an hour, and it has a little bit of sink and run, which can be a little bit intriguing. He's got a mid-70s curveball and a mid-80s slider, which are okay breaking pitches, nothing to write home about, and his control has improved a little bit since his time at Florida State, but it isn't great. That strikeout rate is paired with a very high walk rate, and that's something that the White Sox are going to need to do to adjust his game and be a little bit better at making him a successful, most likely reliever in the long term. When you look at the White Sox projecting starting rotation, you see all right-handed pitchers, so the fact that Drohan's a lefty bodes well for his success in the future. I think he's definitely a reliever. I don't see him fitting in that starting rotation, but having a left-handed guy is going to be important, especially given that a lot of their bullpen right now, like Luis Patino, who they just acquired from the Rays, former top prospect, Delvi Garcia, who is another former top prospect from the Yankees, are all on 0 options, which means they can't be demoted down to the minor leagues. So having someone like Drohan, I think, offers a little bit more flexibility when you have a lot of guys you're going to have to get rid of off your roster completely as right-handed pitchers if you need to make any flexibility in your bullpen. So I think there's a decent chance he sticks. I don't think there's a huge chance, but the White Sox are not in a place to contend right now, so there's always a chance that he does stick in the major league level, but I give him about a 50-50 shot. Overall, I give this pick a B-. I don't think it's a horrible pick. I think a lefty reliever is always a good thing. Is with the loogie rules, now that you have to face an entire inning's worth or at least 3 batters, it kind of hurts his value, especially because he didn't have a ton of control. He walks a couple guys. You're going to have to keep him in for another batter. But there's still a little bit of potential there. If he can get his control in, he'll be a solid middle relief guy. I don't see him breaking out in a huge way, as I'll see with the next guy we're going to talk about, but I think there's still a little bit of potential for him to be a good player, and that's something you can really only ask for if you're a rebuilding team like the Chicago White Sox. The Washington Nationals had the next pick and dipped into the division rival Miami Marlins system and selected Nasim Nunez, who MLB Pipeline had ranked as the 16th best prospect for the Miami Marlins. Nunez is a very interesting prospect, and that's kind of why I'm excited about him. He has zero power. He is not going to hit many home runs. If he hits 5 in a season, I think that's a success for him. His hit tool is also not great. You can see based on his stats, he's really not hitting the ball a lot. For instance, in 2023 in AA, he hit 224 average, but he got on base a ton, 341, which means he's walking a lot. He just doesn't have a good hit tool, and that is not going to translate to the major league level. He's not going to hit, but what is exciting about him is his defense. It's somewhat ironic because I've seen this guy play in person, and it's obvious he's a great defender, but I can't find any highlights of him playing defensively, but he has incredible arm strength and super elite range, and that's going to make him a very, very important defender at shortstop. Although the Nationals do have CJ Abrams, they can use him to get a day off, and Nunez is a switch hitter, so there's always that added versatility of him being able to go against lefties and righties, and he has really great run speed. He's an elite base stealer, and he's going to have a lot of impact on the diamond, both defensively and in the run game, which sounds weird to say in baseball, but Nunez, now with the new stolen base rules, is definitely going to be a beneficiary of bigger bases on the base paths. As I've already mentioned, CJ Abrams is going to be the everyday shortstop for the Nationals. He was a former top prospect, someone who did pretty well so far in 2023, and is going to be an important piece going forward. But when you look at everyone else, Luis Garcia, Carter Kieboom, there's not a lot of big names that jump out of you, and Ildemargo Vargas isn't a name that I'm going to be super excited about as someone coming in late in the game to go and potentially be a defensive replacement or try and win the game. Granted, Nunez doesn't have any ability with his bat right now, but there's still potential for him to be a good player, and I think that's pretty exciting for a Nationals team that's really in the midst of a pretty long rebuild. I'll give the Nationals a B+ simply because I think Nunez has the time to go ahead and stay in their 26-man roster. He doesn't have to play every day. He can be a very good defensive replacement. He can be a good base stealer, and that's all you really need off your bench. Someone can come in late in the game, be a defensive replacement, steal a bag in a critical situation. I think Nunez is a great pick for them in terms of where they are right now in the rebuild. Maybe they can flip him at a couple years down the line if a team needs to get someone like that off their bench. And he has ample time to go and refine his skills offensively, and that is such a big thing. Although the Nationals aren't the most analytically inclined team, they're certainly not one of the lesser analytically inclined teams, so there's a lot of time for him to grow and develop, and I love this pick for the Nationals. The next pick made was by the St. Louis Cardinals, who took Ryan Fernandez, a right-handed relief pitcher from the Boston Red Sox organization. He's 100% a reliever with a nice four-seam fastball in the mid-90s, a slider, and a cutter, which both have solid movement, but isn't anything to really write home about. The Cardinals are looking for bullpen help, and although Fernandez fits the bill, he's not going to be a guy who I would love to see come out. He's not going to be someone who's going to be a high-leverage guy. He's going to be a multi-inning guy. He's played 128 games in his minor league career and pitched 218 innings, so he's going to be a multi-inning guy. That's just what he is. He's not going to be someone you're going to see really come out and pitch a dominant 7th, 8th, or 9th inning. He's going to be starter comes out early. You need a guy to eat a couple innings, which frankly, that's what Rule 5 picks are generally for, and the Cardinals are probably looking to contend a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked if that's just what they did to kind of make their contention a little bit easier in 2024. Have a guy who can come in as a bridge, and if it doesn't work out, it's only a $100,000 loss. Looking at the Cardinals roster, they have some decent starting pitching options. Sonny Gray's been really good, but a lot of them are really old. You know, there's not a single pitcher right now under the age of 32, so that's not boding well for their future success. So this is a win-now team. Ryan Fernandez is not necessarily a win-now player, but you're going to have a lot of old players in your starting rotation, so giving them a break whenever you can, maybe limiting their innings count, will be a big step towards them being successful. I think Fernandez does that effectively enough. Overall, though, I really don't like Fernandez as a player. The 23rd round pick out of 2018 MLB draft, he's okay, but he's not going to be anyone to write home about, which is why I'm going to give this a C-. It's a fine pick, but nothing that I really love for the St. Louis Cardinals. The Mets made the next selection of this draft and took Justin Slaten, a relief pitcher from the Texas Rangers organization, and immediately flipped him to the Boston Red Sox. In that deal, the Red Sox sent back their 2023 10th round pick left-hander Ryan Ammons out of Clemson. Slaten had a lot of buzz going into this draft. I think everyone expected him to get taken because he's a high strikeout guy. He struck out a ton of guys, and that's something that's really appealing, especially because he's slated to be a reliever. I think Slaten has a chance to be a high leverage guy in the future if he can go ahead and get his control under control, ironically. He doesn't walk a ton of guys, but he just doesn't have great location, and his command isn't there. So although, again, control and command are two different things, I just think he needs to work on a little bit more. Location is important, and simply because he's not walking a lot of guys, that's simply because he gets a lot of swing and miss. His slider is elite, and I think that's something that most people in industry would agree with, or at least say it's close to it. has a lot of break, and although it's in the low to mid 80s, it pairs very well with that fastball. That's a big mile per hour difference, and that can really throw batters off. It's knee buckling, it really goes and just breaks hard, and that's something that's really appealing and something I think the Rangers really missed out on. The Red Sox are in such an interesting spot because Tanner Houck, Cutter Crawford, Josh Winkowski, Garrett Whitlock, all are people who kind of bounce between starting and relieving, and there's so many just variables there that who really knows who's going to be starting for the Red Sox going forward. So getting someone like Slaten in who you know is going to be a reliever is a good thing. And Slaten is someone who could very easily find himself in a late leverage role. I love this acquisition by the Red Sox. I think the Mets kind of gave him away for free, and they might come to regret that. This is very easily an A-. I think this is a good pick, especially for Rule 5 standards. There's still one player who I liked a little bit more, who we'll get to in a second, but for the Red Sox, as they go to retool a little bit, I think this is a very good pick and someone that Red Sox fans should be very happy about going forward. Slaten is going to be a staple in their bullpen for a long time. The only other team to pick a position player was the Cleveland Guardians. With their next pick, they chose third baseman Deyvison de los Santos from the Arizona Cardinals, and in my opinion, he was the best player available at the Rule 5 draft, and I think the Guardians getting him was an absolute steal. The Guardians have absolutely won the winter meeting so far, in my opinion. Even if the Yankees land Juan Soto, they got the #1 overall pick with only a 2% chance to do so, and got the best player available in the Rule 5 draft who should make an immediate impact for their team. De Los Santos is only 20 years old, born in 2003, so the fact he was left available is kind of surprising for me. He only reached AA, but put up pretty good numbers, a .254 batting average, a .728 OPS, and for being really young for the class, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, the Diamondbacks are looking to contend, so I get why they might want to keep that roster spot open for other reasons, but Santos was too good of a player to pass up. The Diamondbacks signed him for $200,000 out of the Dominican Republic in 2019, and it was really because of his power. He's decent in the field, nothing great. He doesn't hit for a lot. He's not a big guy like that. He doesn't have a lot of speed, but it's his power that's really close to elite that brings him home and brings him a lot of potential. He smacked 20 home runs in AA, and for a 20-year-old, that's really impressive. That just goes to show you that he has some really good power. What's interesting is he has that power, but he's really small. He's only 5'11", 185, so there's a lot more he can tap into. The potential there is huge, and although the Guardians are probably going to want to contend for that AL Central crown in 2024, I think Deyvison de los Santos is a great piece to go ahead and potentially supplement there, maybe even start a couple games, and could be a breakout start in 2024. Looking at the Guardians lineup, there's not a ton of big pop there. Steven Kwan's been very good since getting called up. Ramon Laureano is having an interesting year. Jose Ramirez is a star as well. But first baseman's kind of a question mark. Kyle Manzardo, who they got at the trade deadline, a top 100 prospect, hasn't been added to the 40-man roster. He doesn't need to, so maybe he doesn't even start the season there. So maybe Deyvison de los Santos is the opening day first baseman, which would be a crazy thought. Christian Bethancourt could play there potentially, but I don't see it. I think he's probably going to end up as the starting first baseman on opening day, and Manzardo will come up mid-season or pretty early in the season and supplement him there. This acquisition is easily an A+. He's very young. He has a lot of potential. He is a top 10 prospect by Baseball America, a top 5 prospect in the system by MLB Pipeline. There's so much good thing that could happen from him. He could play a little third base too if needed, if Jose Ramirez needs a day off or gets injured. There's just so many good things that can come out of this. I love this acquisition. I think both teams that made the World Series, the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers, both lost 2 players that could help them this coming year potentially get back to the World Series. So I think that the Cleveland Guardians really made out as the clear winner of not only the Rule 5 draft, but the winter meetings as well. Out of all the acquisitions that Padres fans were excited about, Stephen Kolek probably wasn't the one they were looking for, but he's on the roster regardless. Kolek is someone I'd call a good player. He puts decent up stats. He's not going to strike out a ton of guys, but enough. He's not going to walk a ton of guys, but still walks a little bit. People still get on base. He's going to have a decently high ERA, but not a crazy high ERA, but not a great ERA. Not a bad thing to be defined by as a good player by my metrics, but it doesn't mean you're going to be a star, and I think Kolek might struggle a little bit, but he'll come in his own if he can stick around in the major leagues, and I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being returned to the Mariners and just staying that way. The Padres have a lot of question marks going into 2024 with Juan Soto likely to be traded at the time of recording this video any minute now to the Yankees. Who knows where he's going to end up, but there's still some potential, and he's the brother of former first-round pick Tyler Kolek of the Marlins, who fizzled out pretty unceremoniously, which is disappointing. But if Stephen Kolek can put things together, I think he'll be a good player for the Padres going forward. I really debated even including this in my description, but this is going to be so different, most likely in a day or two, because the Yankees are going to be trading a ton of pitching, most likely, to the Padres. So who knows what this is going to look like. But I think there's a decent chance he sticks. I think there's some interesting pieces that could get sent down. Most people have a minor league option left, so there's very easily some flexibility that can happen there, which is a good thing. And I don't see Kolek being a starter. He's been a reliever his basically entire career, so I think he'll stay there, and there's some flexibility that the Padres can have, which is always a good thing. I'm going to give this a C question mark simply because so much is going to change, but the Padres know what they're doing. They know what these deals for Juan Soto will include, so if they think Kolek is going to have a chance to make their roster and make them better in the context of this deal, I'm all for it. But until I get the clearer picture and we all get the clearer picture, I don't really feel comfortable giving them a solid grade, and C is middle of the road, and I think Kolek is a middle of the road guy who he's not someone I love, but he's not someone I hate, and frankly, there's people I hate who probably could have gotten drafted. Well, hate's a strong word, but I think Kolek's solid enough that the Padres will be okay with him, and if he doesn't make their roster, it's only a $100,000 loss. To account for the loss of Justin Slaten, the Texas Rangers took Carson Coleman from the New York Yankees and have added him to their bullpen. I think Coleman's a somewhat suitable replacement for Slaten. He strikes out a lot of batters in 2022, which is the last time he pitched because he was out for all of 2023. He struck out 95 batters in 63 1/3 inning pitched and kept his whip under 0.9, which is pretty impressive. He's going to be 26 to start 2024, so it's still a little bit old, but it's worth a shot, and especially for a team that needs some bullpen help, I don't think this is a horrible option for them to go ahead and try and do it. And as you can see on the screen, he was actually part of a joint no-hitter closing out a game in the 9th inning, so he has some closing experience, which I think will be good for a Rangers team looking to 2P as World Series champion. As I mentioned, I don't think the Rangers have the best bullpen, and there's a lot of guys who don't have options, so they're going to make things a little bit difficult going forward if they want to keep him on the roster. There's not a lot of flexibility to send guys down, and he's the only righty who has options left, so it's going to be really interesting to see how the Rangers manage their bullpen. With that being said, there's not a ton of guys who I love on this roster, especially in the bullpen, so maybe someone like Yuri Rodriguez or Jonathan Fernandez ends up getting DFA'd in place of Carson Coleman, because I think Coleman has some potential, and that's something that's pretty exciting if I am the Texas Rangers. Unfortunately for them, I give them a B+ simply because I don't think he's better than Justin Slater, and that's just my personal preference. I think there's some potential there. He's a good player, and he's better than a couple of the first guys that got drafted by the A's. I think he's probably the best Yankees prospect that ended up getting drafted in the Rule 5 draft, and he'll be a good impact player. I give him maybe a 60% chance of sticking on the roster the entire year, which is higher than I'd give a lot of other players, simply because the Rangers need bullpen help. But it's not as high as someone like De Los Santos, simply because there's not a ton of guys who have minor league options available for the Rangers to send down should he struggle a little bit and want to keep him on the roster. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. There's going to be 2 videos that pop up on your screen on the left and right top corners. Go ahead and hit those if you're interested, and hit that baseball in the middle or the link in my description to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next video.